The council chamber was enormous, filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some floated in special pods filled with their home atmosphere. Others stood on platforms adjusted to their gravity needs. In the center of it all, Ambassador Linda Martinez stood at the human podium wearing her best diplomatic smile. She had been wearing that smile for 3 years now. Sometimes it felt like her face might crack from the effort. "We understand the Council's concerns," Linda said, her voice warm and patient. "Humanity is happy to review our mining operations again. We want to be good neighbors." Beside her, Commander Greg Phillips shifted his weight slightly. He had reviewed the latest Council demands on the flight here. Every single one was unreasonable. Every single one targeted humanity specifically. The tall insect-like representative from the Zenthari Dominion clicked his mandibles together. His name was Crixthal, and he seemed to take special pleasure in making things difficult for humans. "Perhaps the humans are too flexible," Crixthal said through his translator. "You arrived here only 30 cycles ago. Such a young species, so eager to please." Linda's smile never wavered. "We believe in cooperation, Representative. Building friendships, not walls." In the observer section, Captain Jake Morrison watched the exchange with growing frustration. He had fought in the colony wars. He had seen what humans could do when necessary. This endless bowing and scraping felt wrong to him. The Vryn delegate pulsed with light from inside its tank. The Vryn were one of the oldest species in the Council. They had been in charge for thousands of years. "Then humanity will not object to our new tax on your mining operations," the Vryn said. 40% seems reasonable." Greg leaned close to Linda. 40%? That's robbery. Linda put a gentle hand on his arm, a warning to stay quiet. "We'll need to discuss this with our government, of course. But I'm sure we can find a compromise." The session dragged on for hours. The Helix Confederation wanted humans to abandon their shipyard in the Kepler system. The Azeran Collective demanded that human ships submit to inspections when traveling through their space. No other species had to do this. The Threen Empire suggested that maybe humans shouldn't be allowed to vote on council matters until they understood galactic culture better. To every demand, every insult disguised as a suggestion, Linda smiled and nodded. She thanked them for their guidance. She promised to consider their requests. When the session finally ended, Greg followed her back to their quarters. The moment the door closed, Linda collapsed into a chair. The diplomatic mask fell away, revealing exhaustion underneath. "Linda, they're walking all over us," Greg said. 40% taxes? Forced inspections? What's next?" Linda rubbed her temples. "I know, Greg, believe me, I know. Then why do we keep taking it?" "Because that's what Earth wants. No conflicts. No confrontations." She looked up at him and he saw the frustration in her eyes. Humanity spent centuries tearing itself apart in wars. Now that we're finally united and out here, the leadership wants peace at any cost. Greg stared out the window at the massive council station. "And what do you think?" "I think some species mistake patience for weakness." She stood and straightened her uniform. "But I'm a soldier following orders, same as you. Tomorrow we go back in there and I smile and compromise until they're satisfied." What neither of them knew was that tomorrow would be very different. Because far away, 2,000 light-years from where they stood, a Zenthari raiding fleet had just entered human space. The Zenthari had made a terrible mistake. They assumed that humanity's diplomatic restraint meant humans couldn't fight back. In the military command center on Earth, Admiral Henry Brooks stared at the incoming reports. His face was like stone. 3 Zenthari cruisers had attacked the New Boston colony without warning. New Boston was a farming colony. 12,000 families grew food there. There were schools, hospitals, parks where children played. The Zenthari had destroyed it all. "Get me a casualty count," Brooks said quietly. His aide's voice shook. "Preliminary reports say 40,000 dead, sir." They hit the agricultural dome, the schools, the residential areas. They weren't targeting military installations. There weren't any military installations to target. Brooks closed his eyes for just a moment. 40,000 people, families, children gone. What's the official Zenthari position? Crixthal just filed a complaint with the council. He's claiming New Boston was a secret weapons facility. He says the attack was a proportional response to human aggression. That's a lie. Yes, sir. But will the council care? Brooks opened his eyes. In them was a coldness that his aide had never seen before. "Get me Ambassador Martinez. Secure channel. Then get me the president. It's time." Time for what, sir? Time to stop being polite. 3 hours later, Linda woke to her communicator's emergency signal. Admiral Brooks appeared on her screen. Ambassador Martinez, we have a situation. Linda sat up immediately, suddenly wide awake.
What happened?
The Xanthari hit New Boston. 40,000 civilians dead. They're calling it a police action against illegal weapons. Linda, they murdered children. The room seemed to spin. 40,000? We have proof it was a civilian colony. Documentation from a dozen independent species. It won't matter. Crixthal is already spinning the narrative to the council. Linda's diplomatic training kicked in automatically. We need to handle this through proper channels. Present the evidence. File formal protests? No. Brooks's voice cut through her words like a knife. Earth Command is invoking Article 12. We're done playing nice, Article 12. Linda felt her stomach drop. Article 12 had never been used. It suspended all diplomatic protocols when humanity faced an existential threat. Admiral, if we escalate this... They escalated when they murdered 40,000 civilians. We're just responding. His voice softened slightly. Linda, you've done everything right. You've been patient and diplomatic. Everything we asked. But there are limits. They just found ours. Linda thought about the years of condescension, the increasingly aggressive demands, the way other species had learned they could push humanity around without consequences. She thought about 40,000 people who would never wake up. What do you need me to do? Keep the council contained while we handle the Xanthari. Can you do that? Yes, Admiral. I can do that. Good. President Harper will address the council in 6 hours. She's not asking for permission. She's telling them what's going to happen. When the transmission ended, Linda sat alone in the darkness. Then she stood, finished dressing, and contacted the rest of the human delegation. Everyone to the conference room now. We have work to do. By morning, everything had changed. The human delegation walked into the council chamber with different expressions. No more apologetic smiles. No more gentle tones. When Linda took her position at the podium, her face was professional and completely neutral. Crixthal was already speaking, explaining why the Xanthari had been justified in destroying New Boston. Linda listened to him talk about security concerns and defensive actions and proportional responses. Then she interrupted him. 40,000 civilians. The chamber went silent. Species turned to stare at the humans. Linda had never interrupted anyone before. Humans didn't do that. Humans were polite. Crixthal's mandibles clicked in annoyance. The human ambassador forgets herself. I have the floor. You had the floor. Linda activated her display. Images filled the central screens. Destroyed homes. Ruined schools. Bodies being pulled from rubble. A child's toy floating in the debris field. This is New Boston. This is what you did. Unfortunate casualties of necessary action, Crixthal began. War crimes, Linda said calmly. The calmness was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. Deliberate attacks on civilians, and you will answer for them. The chamber erupted. Species shouted questions. Representatives demanded explanations. Everything was chaos. And through it all, Linda stood perfectly still, no longer smiling, no longer compromising. The polite humans were gone. Something else had taken their place. And the galaxy was about to learn what humanity looked like when the diplomatic mask came off. Commander Greg Phillips stood beside Ambassador Linda Martinez at the podium. He activated his tactical display, and the council chamber's central screens lit up with information that made every representative lean forward in shock. This is the Human Defense Network, Greg said. His voice was steady and professional. You've seen about 15% of it. The public shipyards we registered. The patrol routes we filed with council navigation. The merchant vessels you inspected. He pressed another control. The display exploded with new markers. Hundreds of ship signatures appeared across the star map, like someone had turned on the lights in a dark room. Then hundreds more, then thousands. This is everything else. The council chamber went from chaos to stunned silence in seconds. That's impossible, the Threen representative said. His voice carried disbelief and something that might have been fear. We have scan stations throughout the galaxy. We would have detected a fleet this large. You detected exactly what we wanted you to detect. Captain Jake Morrison had left the observer section to join the delegation. His uniform carried medals from battles the council didn't know had happened. While you watched our public yards build passenger ships, we were building our actual military somewhere else. Linda gestured to the display. Every colony you've visited, every station you've inspected, every shipyard you've monitored, those were all real. We weren't hiding our civilian presence. We were hiding what protects it. A mechanical voice spoke from the Azaran section. The Council has regulations about military buildup. Humanity has violated dozens of disclosure treaties. We violated nothing. Greg pulled up a document and broadcast it across every screen. Article 7, Section 12 of the Galactic Accords, which humanity signed when we joined the Council. I'll read the important part. Member species must register all military vessels operating in Council-monitored space and must disclose shipbuilding capacity within established zones. He highlighted specific words. Council-monitored space. Established zones. The problem is that 70% of human military infrastructure exists in space the Council doesn't monitor. You never bothered to map our territory. You assumed what you saw was all we had. You deceived us, Crixthal said. His mandibles were clicking rapidly now, a sign of agitation in his species. We exercised discretion. There's a difference. Linda's voice remained level. When humanity joined the Council 30 years ago, 3 different species advised us to limit our military profile. You said it would make other civilizations nervous. You told us the Council values peaceful species, so we took that advice. We kept our defensive capabilities quiet. While smiling and nodding through every insult you threw at us, Jake added. Every unreasonable demand. Every time you treated us like stupid children. We remembered all of it. The Vryn delegate pulsed rapidly inside its tank. If this is true, why reveal it now? You could have maintained your deception indefinitely. Because we don't need to anymore. Linda's expression was completely neutral. No smile, no warmth. Just facts. The Zenthari Dominion attacked a civilian target, murdered 40,000 humans, and then lied about it to this Council. That was our line. They crossed it. She advanced the display to show new tactical information. Ship movements, fleet positions, strategic deployments. As of 2 hours ago, the Terran Defense Fleet has been fully mobilized. Our ships are moving into position throughout the sector. The Zenthari have 72 hours to surrender the officers responsible for the New Boston massacre, pay reparations to the victims' families, and submit to investigation by a neutral third party. And if they refuse? The question came from a smaller species called the Pellans. They had their own history of being bullied by larger Council members. Then we go to war, Greg said simply. And we win. Crixthal's laughter filled the chamber. The translation software made it sound harsh and grating. Arrogance? The Zenthari Dominion commands fleets that have conquered 100 worlds. Our warriors are legendary. Your hidden ships mean nothing. Wrong. Admiral Henry Brooks appeared on the main display, transmitting from Earth. While you were building your reputation by conquering primitive species and bullying civilians, we were preparing to fight someone who might actually fight back. He pulled up comparative analyses, technical specifications, tactical assessments. The Zenthari Dominion has 600 warships. Impressive numbers, but they're designed to intimidate species with limited defenses. Your whole strategy is built on quick strikes and overwhelming force against weak opponents. Brooks gestured and the display showed a Zenthari cruiser next to a human destroyer. The Zenthari ship was larger, but the technical details told a different story. Your shields defend against energy weapons common among Council species. Our weapons go through shields. Your armor stops traditional projectiles. Our missiles turn armor into shrapnel from the inside. Your computer systems use standard Council architecture. We have electronic warfare suites that will turn your ships into floating scrap. Another image appeared. General Lisa Hayes, commander of the Terran Marine Corps. And if any of your ships reach our installations, you'll discover why humanity spent 10,000 years getting very good at ground combat. Every Marine trains in gravity from 0.3 to 2 Gs. We drill in every environment from vacuum to deep ocean. Each soldier can operate independently for weeks without resupply. She smiled, and it wasn't friendly. Why does a peaceful species need soldiers like that? Because we're peaceful by choice, not necessity. We're not afraid of you. The Council chamber had gone from shocked to terrified. Species that had spent years dismissing humanity as weak and naive were suddenly recalculating everything they thought they knew. A floating crystalline being from the Helix Confederation spoke. Its name was Shard. But your behavior has been so accommodating. If you had this strength all along, why accept our demands? Linda's expression softened just slightly. Because we meant it when we said we wanted peace. Earth spent centuries at war with itself. We know what conflict costs. We know what it does to people and cultures. When we came to the stars and found the Council, we saw a chance to be part of something better. We wanted to believe cooperation was possible. So we tried, Greg continued. We compromised. We accepted restrictions we didn't need to accept. We followed rules other species ignored. We did everything we could to be good neighbors. Jake's voice was harder, but we're not idiots. We knew some of you saw kindness as weakness. So while we were being diplomatic up here, we were building down there, just in case. Turns out we were right to be careful. Admiral Brooks leaned forward. Here's where things stand. The Xanthari committed an act of war. They will face consequences. The rest of you need to decide what kind of galaxy you want. One where murdering civilians gets punished or one where it doesn't. Because humanity isn't asking for permission anymore. We're not begging for fair treatment. We're not hoping you'll see us as equals. Linda's voice carried throughout the chamber. Every word was clear and deliberate. We are equals. We've always been equals. We were just too polite to insist on it. That politeness ended when the Xanthari killed 40,000 civilians. The silence was complete. 1,000 years of council politics had just been turned upside down by a species everyone had underestimated. Finally, the Pellan delegate spoke. Her voice was small but determined. What do you want from us? Nothing you weren't supposed to give us anyway, Linda replied. Respect. Fair treatment. The same rights and responsibilities as every other council member. And justice for New Boston. And if the Xanthari refuse your ultimatum? The Vryn asked. Then watch, Admiral Brooks said, and learn why humanity's politeness was actually a gift. The transmission ended. The council chamber remained silent as representatives processed what had just happened. The humans stood at their podium, no longer smiling, no longer compromising. The galaxy was about to change, and everyone knew it. The Xanthari response came 6 hours later. Krikstal's face appeared on screens throughout human space. His mandibles were spread wide in what his species considered a threatening posture. The Xanthari Dominion does not negotiate with inferior species. Your hidden fleet does not frighten us. Your technology does not impress us. You have 72 hours to withdraw all human vessels from the Outer Rim and apologize to the Dominion. Failure to comply will have consequences. The message ended. Aboard the human flagship Defiant, Admiral Brooks watched the recording with Captain Jake Morrison and Commander Greg Phillips. The ship was positioned 3 light hours from the Council station, part of the newly revealed defense network. Well, Jake said after a moment, I guess they chose wrong. They're about to learn an expensive lesson. Brooks pulled up displays showing Xanthari fleet movements. Their response is to mass their forces. They're pulling ships from 6 sectors, gathering near their forward base in the Crick system. Greg studied the formations. They think we're going to meet them head-on. Traditional fleet battle. Bigger force wins. Which is exactly what they would do, Brooks agreed. But we're not playing by their rules. Commander Phillips, please brief Captain Morrison on Operation Checkmate. Greg activated a tactical projection. While humanity was being polite, we weren't just building ships. We were studying every council species' military tactics. The Xanthari especially. He highlighted their fleet positioning. They're aggressive but predictable. They mass force, strike hard, and expect enemies to either surrender or die. They've never fought an opponent with real strategy. Meaning? Jake asked. Meaning they're about to learn what happens when prey fights back intelligently. Greg zoomed out. The display showed multiple human strike groups, each targeting different objectives. Not warships, infrastructure. Their forward base. Their supply depot. Their shipyards. Their command hub. We're not trying to defeat their fleet. We're cutting it off from everything it needs. Jake's eyes widened. We're not fighting their ships. We're destroying their ability to fight at all. Exactly. Brooks smiled grimly. Let them gather their forces. Let them wait for the big battle. While they're posturing, we dismantle their war machine. The operation began at hour 68 of the ultimatum. The Xanthari never saw it coming. Human ships appeared throughout Xanthari space simultaneously. Not massive dreadnoughts that would show up on scanners from far away, fast attack craft, stealth destroyers. strike vessels designed for exactly this kind of mission. The Zenthari forward base in the Crick system went first. It was defended by orbital weapons platforms and a garrison fleet. The Zenthari considered it impregnable. The defenders watched their sensors confidently, secure in their superiority. Then space tore apart around them. Human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel inside the defensive perimeter. Before alarms could even sound, missiles were impacting targets. The orbital platforms designed to track threats at distance never had time to turn. They were built for traditional attacks, not enemies appearing right next to them. Commander Patricia Cole watched from her destroyer Relentless, leading the strike group. All batteries fire on designated targets. Electronic warfare jammed their communications. No distress signals leave this system. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, the Zenthari forward base was an expanding debris field. No call for help escaped. 300 light-years away, the Zenthari shipyards met similar fate. The facility had produced warships for 2 centuries. Suddenly, it was under attack by weapons it couldn't track. Human stealth technology had been refined through decades of development. The Zenthari had never needed stealth because they always won through force. They had no defense against it. Captain Ryan Fuller commanded from the Phantom, a ship officially listed as a long-range scout. In reality, it was a warfare platform capable of operating alone deep in enemy territory. Target construction base first, he ordered. Make every ship being built unusable. Then the dry docks. Then supply infrastructure. Leave the administrative stations and living quarters intact. We're not here to kill civilians, that part was crucial. Every human ship carried standing orders about civilian casualties. The Zenthari had murdered 40,000 civilians. Humanity would not become what they were fighting. The shipyards burned. The workers evacuated safely. Reports flooded Zenthari High Command. Forward base destroyed. Primary shipyard crippled. Supply depots gone. Communication relays offline. And their massive fleet sat uselessly in space with nothing to do and nowhere to go. Fleet Commander Zrixtal commanded from his flagship. 600 warships under his control. Crews trained for generations in conquest. But they had been trained to fight enemies who fought the same way. Stand and deliver. Fleet against fleet. Superior force wins. The humans weren't fighting that way. Where are they? Zrixtal demanded. 600 ships and we can't find them? They're everywhere and nowhere, his tactical officer reported. Small groups. Hit and run. They strike and disappear before we can respond. Our forces are too concentrated. By the time we reach any battle site, they're gone. Then split our forces. Send hunter groups. Commander, that's what they want. Every analysis suggests they're trying to fragment our fleet. The officer hesitated. Questioning commanders wasn't part of Zenthari culture. But these were unusual circumstances. We should maintain formation. Defend critical assets. What critical assets? They've already hit everything important. The truth was settling in. The Zenthari Dominion, which built its reputation on military might, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy they had dismissed as weak. The humans weren't trying to win a glorious battle. They were eliminating the Dominion's capacity to threaten anyone. At the council station, other species watched intelligence reports in stunned silence. The Zenthari, who had seemed untouchable, were being handled with surgical precision. They're not even angry, the Pellan delegate whispered. That's what terrifies me. The humans aren't fighting with rage. They're just solving a problem. At hour 71, Admiral Brooks transmitted directly to Zrixtal. Fleet Commander, your shipyards are destroyed. Your supply lines are cut. Your forward positions are eliminated. You have maybe 60 combat-effective vessels left, and they're surrounded. Your choice is simple. Surrender the officers responsible for New Boston, or lose everything. We have no interest in conquering your worlds or occupying your space. We want justice for murdered civilians. That's all. Zrixtal stared at the human admiral's image. For the first time, he saw the being behind the diplomatic smile. And if I refuse? Then in 72 hours, the Zenthari Dominion will cease to exist as a military power. We'll reduce every weapons platform, every warship, every military installation to scrap. We'll do it without killing your civilians because, unlike you, we know the difference between soldiers and children. But make no mistake, we will do it. Brooks leaned forward. You thought we were weak because we were kind. You confused patience with inability. Those were expensive mistakes. Don't make another one. The transmission ended. Zrixtal sat in his command chair, surrounded by the might of the Dominion fleet. He was looking at defeat, not glorious death in battle that Xanthari culture celebrated, just simple, methodical defeat by a species they had fatally underestimated. At hour 72, the Xanthari Dominion formally surrendered. The council chamber had never been this quiet. Ambassador Linda Martinez stood at the human podium, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives from 37 other species. Many were smaller civilizations that had spent decades suffering treatment similar to what humanity endured. The Pellan delegate had approached Linda 3 days after the Xanthari surrender. "We watched how you conducted this war," she had said. "Precise, limited, no civilian casualties. You could have destroyed them completely. Why didn't you?" Linda had considered the question carefully. "Because that's not who we are. We're not interested in domination or revenge. We just wanted them to stop." Now, as the full council assembled for the first time since the conflict, those 37 species stood with humanity. Not as followers, but as allies. Crixthal was notably absent. The Xanthari Dominion had replaced their entire diplomatic corps as part of surrender terms. The new representative, a younger Xanthari named Vixarin, sat quietly in their section with mandibles held in what humans had learned was extreme humility. The Vryn delegate pulsed with confused colors. "Ambassador Martinez, the council would hear humanity's position. Your military capability has altered the power balance in this region. Many species are concerned about what this means." "I'll bet they are," Greg muttered beside Linda. She gave him a look, then addressed the council. "The Terran Alliance has no territorial ambitions beyond our current space. We have no interest in conquest, intimidation, or control. What we do have is commitment to defending ourselves and our allies from aggression." She gestured to the species behind her. "These civilizations have agreed to mutual defense pacts with humanity. Not because we forced them, because they chose to, because they're tired of being bullied, threatened, and dismissed by larger powers." The Helix Confederation representative, a being of pure energy in a magnetic bottle, flickered with concern. "You're proposing an alternative to the council?" "We're proposing the council remember what it was supposed to be." Captain Jake Morrison had joined them, adding military presence to the diplomatic discussion. "A forum for cooperation. A place where species resolve disputes peacefully, not a club where the powerful prey on the weak." Admiral Brooks appeared via transmission. "The Terran Alliance is not leaving the council. But we're no longer pretending everything is fine when it isn't. The Xanthari situation was a symptom of a larger problem. Some species have learned they can act without consequences." "That ends now," Linda said firmly. "Humanity and our allies will enforce council regulations. The real regulations, not the convenient ones. Attack civilians? We respond. Violate treaties? We respond. Commit genocide? We definitely respond. You're positioning yourselves as galactic police," the Threen representative accused. "We're positioning ourselves as species who are done being victims," the Pellan delegate countered. Her voice was stronger than many had heard before. "The council has had millennia to address these issues. It hasn't. Perhaps new leadership is needed." That sparked immediate chaos, dozens of species speaking at once, some supporting, others opposing. The ancient power structures of the council were cracking, and everyone could feel it. The Vryn delegate pulsed rapidly, calling for order. As one of the council's founding species, their word carried weight. When silence returned, they addressed Linda directly. "What happened to the polite humans who joined this council 30 years ago? The ones who smiled and compromised?" Linda's expression was neutral, but her eyes were hard. "They spent 30 years watching species be abused, oppressed, and murdered while the council did nothing. They watched powerful civilizations play political games while people suffered. They tried to work within the system. Tried to change things peacefully." She paused. "The Xanthari killed 40,000 civilians and lied about it to this council. That was when those polite humans realized the system doesn't want to change. So we changed instead," Greg added. "You've destabilized galactic politics," the Azarin representative said. "The power balance that maintained peace for centuries is disrupted." "Maintained peace." Jake's laugh was bitter. "Tell that to the 17 species the Xanthari conquered in the last century. Tell that to the colonies the Helix Confederation raided. Tell that to the Pellan merchants you taxed to death." He shook his head. "You call it peace. We call it oppression." Brooks leaned forward in his transmission. Here's what the Council needs to understand. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want to replace one set of bullies with another. What we want is actual justice, actual equality, actual enforcement of laws everyone claims to follow. And if the Council refuses, the Vryn asked, then the Terran Alliance and our allies will enforce it ourselves. Linda's voice was calm and factual. We have the capability. We've demonstrated the will. The only question is whether the Council wants to be part of the solution or part of the problem. She gestured to displays still showing scattered Xanthari military infrastructure. We can do this diplomatically. We prefer diplomacy, but New Boston taught us that sometimes peace requires strength and justice requires action. The humans speak of consequences, Vixrin said suddenly. The new Xanthari representative's voice carried across the chamber. My species has learned about consequences. We were told we were superior, that smaller species existed for our benefit. We believed it. We acted on it. His mandibles clicked softly. Then we discovered arrogance has a price. The Dominion is broken. Our military is shattered. Our economy is ruined. All because we refused to see other species as equals. He turned to face the Council. The Xanthari Dominion accepts human terms. We will pay reparations. We will submit to oversight. We will reform, not because we're forced to, but because the alternative is extinction. Vixren looked at Linda. The humans could have destroyed us. They didn't. That mercy is the only reason I stand here. The chamber fell silent again. The Council's newest member had just validated everything humanity claimed. Over the next 6 hours, the Council debated. Species formed groups. Alliances shifted. Power structures reformed. When the final vote came, the result was closer than expected but decisive. The Council approved comprehensive reforms, including actual enforcement mechanisms and real consequences for treaty violations. The Terran Alliance and its 37 partners were designated as one of 3 enforcement branches. They would share responsibility with 2 other coalitions formed from traditional Council powers, who decided adaptation was better than conflict. As the session ended, species filed out. Many approached the human delegation. Some offered congratulations. Others wanted to discuss alliances. Still others wanted to understand intentions. Linda watched them come and go, feeling the weight of what had happened. Humanity arrived at the stars hoping for peace. They found politics, prejudice, and power games. In 30 years, they transformed from naive newcomers to major players. They did it by being exactly what the galaxy never expected. Patient enough to wait, strong enough to act, principled enough to show mercy. Greg stood beside her, watching galactic politics reshape itself. Do you think they'll follow through? Real enforcement? Real consequences? Some will, some won't. Linda smiled slightly. But now everyone knows we're watching. And everyone knows we're not bluffing. Jake joined them after finishing a conversation with the Pellan delegation. The smaller species are organizing. They're calling it the Liberty Coalition. They want humanity to take a leadership role. Of course they do, Linda sighed. We demonstrated we'll actually defend them. Are we ready for that responsibility? Jake asked. Linda thought of New Boston. 40,000 people who would never see another sunrise. Families destroyed. Children who never grew up. All because one species thought they could act without consequences. Ready or not, she said. We're the ones who acted. Now we live with it. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it. And there was no going back. Admiral Brooks appeared via transmission again. Ambassador Martinez, President Harper wants to commend your handling of the situation. She also wants to know if you're interested in staying as Council Ambassador or if you'd prefer reassignment. Linda looked around the chamber, at species still adapting to a galaxy where humanity no longer smiled and compromised, at allies who stood with them, at former bullies learning to navigate new reality. I'll stay, she said. Someone needs to make sure they don't forget why this happened. Good, Brooks said. Your polite mode might be off, but we still need your diplomatic skills. The galaxy just changed. Now we figure out what comes next. As the transmission ended, Greg nudged Linda. You realize we're going to be the villains in some species' histories, the aggressive newcomers who disrupted peaceful order. Let them write what they want, Linda replied. We know the truth. The order wasn't peaceful. It was just quiet. There's a difference. She gathered her materials, preparing to leave. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, New attempts by various species to test boundaries of this new reality. But tonight, humanity and its allies had won something more important than military victory. They had won respect, not through appeasement or compromise. Not by being polite and hoping for acceptance. They earned it the hard way by drawing a line and defending it. Over the following weeks, the changes became more apparent. Species that had spent years ignoring smaller civilizations suddenly found their communications answered. Not by the victims alone, but by the Terran Alliance and its partners. Bullying stopped being cost-free. The Helix Confederation tried to raid a mining colony in the outer sectors. 3 human destroyers appeared within minutes. The Helix ships retreated without firing a shot. The message was clear. The old rules no longer applied. The Threen Empire attempted to impose new trade restrictions on Pellan merchants, taxes so high they would effectively end Pellan commerce. The Pellan delegate filed a formal complaint with the council. When the Threen representative dismissed it, Linda stood and asked a simple question. Does the Threen Empire want this to become a Terran Alliance matter? The restrictions were withdrawn the same day. Not every interaction involved threats. Many species genuinely wanted to understand this new dynamic. The Azaran Collective requested a meeting with Linda to discuss mutual concerns. We have acted poorly toward humanity, their representative admitted. We saw your patience as weakness. We pushed because we could. We would like to establish better relations. Linda considered this. The Azaran had been among the worst offenders, demanding inspections and restrictions that applied only to humans. But they were also being honest now, which counted for something. Better relations are possible, she said, but they need to be based on actual equality, not the kind where you demand things and we accept them. Real equality, we understand. What would humanity consider fair terms? They negotiated for 3 days. The final agreement included mutual inspection rights, shared patrol duties in border regions, and technology exchanges that benefited both species. It was the first treaty humanity had signed where they weren't making all the concessions. More species followed. Some approached the Terran Alliance seeking protection. Others wanted trade agreements now that humans were negotiating from strength. A few tried to play both sides, maintaining old alliances while courting new ones. The Zenthari situation stabilized slowly. Vixren proved to be genuinely committed to reform. He worked with human advisors to restructure Zenthari military doctrine, eliminating the aggressive conquest mentality that had defined his species for centuries. It's difficult, he told Linda during one of their regular meetings. Zenthari culture has celebrated military might for thousands of years. Asking them to change that is asking them to change who they are. Not who they are, Linda corrected gently. Just how they express it. There's honor in defense, in protecting rather than conquering, in being strong enough to show restraint. Vixaren's mandibles clicked, and what humans had learned was thoughtful consideration. You speak from experience. Humanity has experience with both paths. We know where the wrong one leads. The Liberty Coalition grew stronger. What started as 37 species became 50, then 70. They weren't all small or weak. Some were mid-sized powers tired of navigating between larger empires. Others were ancient civilizations that had withdrawn from galactic politics in disgust. The coalition offered them something they hadn't had before. A voice that mattered. Jake Morrison was offered command of the coalition's Joint Defense Force. He accepted, working with military leaders from dozens of species to create coordinated defense strategies. It was challenging work. Different species had different strengths, different technologies, different tactical philosophies. But it was also rewarding. For the first time, smaller species could contribute meaningfully to their own defense. They weren't just waiting to be rescued. They were participants. Greg Phillips took a position training coalition military personnel in human tactical doctrine. He found it fascinating how different species approached problems. What humans considered obvious tactics were revolutionary to some species. What other species found intuitive was completely foreign to human thinking. We're learning from each other, he told Linda over dinner one evening. The Pellans have sensor technology we never imagined. The Varax have ship designs that make our engineers jealous. We're not just defending them, they're making us better too. Not everyone was happy with the changes. The old power blocks grumbled about upstarts and troublemakers. Some species that had profited from the previous system found themselves suddenly accountable. There were complaints to the council, formal protests. demands that humanity be censured for disrupting galactic stability. Linda handled each one the same way. She listened politely, reviewed the complaint carefully, and asked a simple question. Did the accused party violate any council regulation? Usually the answer was no. The complaints were about lost influence or reduced profits, not actual rule violations. Linda would acknowledge their concerns and suggest they adapt to changing circumstances. Some did. Others didn't. A few tried to push back, testing whether humanity's resolve matched its rhetoric. The Corvin Sphere decided to blockade a trade route used by several coalition species. It was technically legal under outdated council regulations that no one had enforced in centuries, but it was clearly meant to punish smaller species for aligning with humanity. Terran Alliance responded by establishing an alternative trade route and providing escort ships to any merchant vessels that wanted to use it. Then they filed a motion with the Council to update the regulations that allowed such blockades. The motion passed with surprising support. Even some traditional powers voted for it, recognizing that the old rules needed updating. The Corvin Sphere lifted their blockade 2 days later. 6 months after the Zinthari surrender, Ambassador Linda Martinez stood before the full council again. This time she was presenting humanity's proposal for permanent council reforms, real enforcement mechanisms, clear consequences for violations, protections for smaller species, limits on the power of large empires. It was ambitious. It would fundamentally change how the council operated. Many species would lose privileges they had enjoyed for centuries. This is radical restructuring, the Vryn delegate said. The council has operated under current principles for millennia. Why should we change now? Linda looked at the ancient being in its tank. Because the current system allowed the new Boston Massacre to happen. It allowed centuries of oppression, exploitation, and abuse. It maintained stability by sacrificing justice. That's not good enough anymore. And if we reject these proposals, then the Terran Alliance and our partners will create our own structure. We'd prefer to work within the council. We believe in cooperation, but we won't participate in a system that enables the strong to prey on the weak. The debate lasted for days. Some species supported the reforms immediately. Others needed convincing. A few fought them bitterly, unwilling to give up their advantages. In the end, the reforms passed. Not unanimously, but with enough support to matter. The council would change. It would take time, perhaps decades, but the foundation was laid. As Linda walked out of the council chamber that day, she thought about the journey that brought them here. Humanity had arrived at the stars with hope and optimism. They had been tested, pushed, and finally provoked into action. They had revealed strength they preferred to keep hidden. They had fought a war they tried to avoid, and they had changed the galaxy, not by conquering it, not by imposing their will through force, but by refusing to accept injustice, by standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves, and by proving that kindness backed by strength was more powerful than either alone. The polite humans were gone. But something better had taken their place. Humans who were still diplomatic, still patient, still hopeful about cooperation, but who would no longer smile while injustice happened, who would no longer compromise on fundamental principles, who would no longer mistake peace for the absence of conflict. They had learned that real peace required defending it, that justice required enforcing it, that equality required insisting on it.